welcome to the first ever episode of Creeped Out with Kate. By now, you probably guessed it, I'm Kate, and I'm going to do my best to be here every Saturday putting a chill in your bones and keeping you up at night with my take on all things creepy. On my channel, we're going to talk about paranormal activity and real-life haunted houses. We might review and discuss some horror movies, and some weeks I might just make some creepy cupcakes. To be honest, I really don't know. But if you're interested in sticking around and finding out with me, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, maybe give me a like, and let's get started. So, today we are going to talk about the House of Death. It is said to be haunted by over 22 spirits. It is located in New York City in one of its most historic communities, Greenwich Village. It is at 14 West 10th Street. If you want to go ahead and take a look, put a visual to the story. Because it was a huge mansion, it was occupied by tons of rich and famous people, and one of the most notable was Samuel Clemens. You guys probably know him better by his pseudonym, Mark Twain. Yep. Now, the author of famous books like Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn was a well-known skeptic. He did not believe in anything that he couldn't see himself. And so when he reported some mysterious activity, it was a big deal. Samuel reported that one day, or rather one night, he saw a piece of firewood floating in his fireplace. Instead of running away, fleeing the scene like I definitely would have, he shot at the firewood, ultimately sending it back to the floor or wherever it went. The only thing unusual, he said, was that a couple of drops of blood fell to the ground, but this kind of helped him lock in the idea that it was probably just a couple of mice. He continued to occupy the home for another year until 1901, before leaving and moving to Connecticut with his family. It wouldn't be until 1930 that we see Sam again. But he's not alive this time, heads up. It is said that the home around the 1930s was converted from a single family home into a 10-unit apartment building and was occupied in one of the units by a mother and her daughter. The mother one morning was strolling downstairs before the lights in the joint living area were lit, and she reported seeing something weird. She said she saw a ghost that was dressed in all white with crazy white hair sitting over by a window. She asked the ghost, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" And to that he replied, "I'm Clemens, and I got a problem to solve." Some unfinished business. Unfortunately, the story kind of just cuts off here, and I wasn't able to find any more information. So I did my own research on why old Sammy might have been kept from his final resting place. And upon my research, I found out that he had actually amassed a ton of wealth over his lifetime because he was one of the most paid authors of his time. Rightfully so, because a lot of his works are classic, taught in schools and read by children. I know I've read a couple of his books, but anyways, that's aside from the point. Sam was terrible with money. He squandered everything he had on failed startups and investments that ultimately went nowhere. And by the time of his death, he owed somewhere around $30,000. Which I know doesn't seem like a crazy amount, but if you think about the fact that this was in the 1900s, today that would be around $750,000, which is quite a bit. Now, that's just one of the ideas I came up with, why he might have some unfinished business, but the next two actually are probably more likely. So first, Samuel was 6th of 7 children, and very sadly, due to freak accidents and just crazy illnesses, he was one of only 3 of those children to ever reach adulthood. On top of this, Sam's dad passed away when he was 11 years old, and he had to find a job to help support his family and his mom. One of the jobs that he got later on was as a pilot on a riverboat called the Pennsylvania. He worked on the boat for just a couple of months before his younger brother Henry came and asked for a job. Ultimately, Henry got the job, and he only worked on the boat for a few weeks before a terrible accident occurred and the boat's boiler exploded, killing tons of people, including Henry. Now, I feel like that is enough to keep anyone around. But Sam's is not the only story from 14 West 10th Street. The next story is that of Jan Bartel. She occupied the home at the top floor with her husband, and she reported some pretty chilling happenings. She mentioned seeing all kinds of ghosts, spirits, terrifying shadows. She did report some really eerie sounds, including that of crashing glass all around her. She actually even reported some strange smells. She said that she smelled something really floral and beautiful, like a woman's perfume, but also a really putrid smell, which I bet we can probably guess what that probably was. She was a self-proclaimed psychic. She was also an amateur actress, and she ended up writing a book about her experience at 14 West 10th Street and just in general, because apparently she was haunted before she even moved there. It just kind of amplified when she moved into the home. Understandable, since supposedly 22 spirits haunted the home. Her stay was brief, and that is all the information I gathered on her. Next, we're going to talk about the last and most terrible story from 14 West 10th Street. I do want to just warn you guys in advance that this one is going to be a lot worse than the other two. There is, very sadly, some mention of child abuse and neglect and even murder. If you guys would prefer not to hear about that, I totally understand. Your mental health is what's most important to me. Please go ahead and put me on mute for maybe the next 3 to 5 minutes. Or if you have to, go ahead and exit the video now. The next story is going to be about Joel Steinberg. You guys probably have heard of him before. In the 1980s, he had a huge high-profile case that was one of the first criminal cases to be televised nationally, just because it was truly terrible. His time in 14 West 10th Street began with his longtime girlfriend, Hedda. Terrible things happened right from the get-go. Hedda was sent to the hospital on multiple occasions by Joel because he was an avid user of cocaine, obviously had some anger issues, and just brutalized her. He just really beat her bad, unfortunately. Despite this, they did actually decide to bring some kids into the mix. Joel was a lawyer, and so unfortunately he knew the loopholes he needed to go through in order to obtain some children legally without the necessary paperwork or timeframes or just anything put in place to keep kids safe. Background checks, that's what I meant. So he is able to adopt 6-year-old Lisa and 14-month-old Mitchell, her brother. They were not there for too long before it was 1987, and a phone call was made to 911 asking for assistance. Hedda had called saying that her daughter was unconscious in the bathroom and they needed help. When paramedics or first responders got there, they described a terribly disgusting scene. It was hard for them, first of all, to get into the door because the home was just trashed. There was stuff everywhere. One of the first things that they saw was a makeshift playpen, which Mitchell was laying in, tied to by ropes. He was very disgustingly and super sadly surrounded by his own filth and only had expired milk to drink. Obviously, he was terribly malnourished and just neglected, and so he was in terrible shape. But unfortunately, just down the hallway in the bathroom, Lisa would be in even worse shape. She was found on the ground, unconscious, like Hedda had said. Naked, though. She was completely covered in bruises. She was extremely emaciated, just malnourished, skinny to the bone because she hadn't been taken care of, unfortunately. Joel had abused her too, and unfortunately, just a little while after she made it to the hospital, she passed away. Now, Joel, as he should have been, was sentenced to serve time in prison, but sadly, he only did 17 years before being released in 2004. As it should have, it sparked outrage kind of across the world because 17 years is not enough time for the atrocities that he committed, like 25 to life minimum. Come on. But that's the story. Some good or kind of positive notes, not good notes, but more positive notes that I wanted to leave you guys on in regards to this case were that Lisa's biological mom found out what happened, and she was able to win the rights not only to remove Joel from Lisa's birth certificate, but also to bury Lisa's remains or do with her remains what she thought fit. Another thing is that child abuse hotlines kind of popped up all over after this case. It became evident that it was necessary, and even until today, you can anonymously call and report child abuse. I actually have a number for you guys in case you need it. It is 1-800-799-7233. You can call and just report what's going on. You don't have to give any of your personal information. But anyways, that's that. The best thing is that Mitchell, the younger brother that survived, in 2004, when Joel was released, he was reported to have started his first year of college. And so he obviously had some kind of a life to have been able to make it to college. By now, since this was 16 years ago, I bet he's got his degree, got his career, maybe a spouse, and possibly a family. And hopefully he's just doing, great. Thank you guys so much for sticking with me through the video, even through some of the more, gruesome details and some of the more boring backstories. I really appreciate it. I do plan to post another video next weekend, of course, next Saturday, perhaps on stone tape theory. It's the idea that spirits can leave their energy on objects to be accessed later on. It was pretty fascinating to me, and I came across the idea or the theory doing research for this video. So if you're interested, definitely come visit my channel next week. It was a pleasure to be here with you guys, and I really hope you have a great rest of your night and stay safe, everybody. Bye!